So imagine if there was like a YouTube fan channel of Zoids, right? Run by someone called Emma. She'd have to call it Emma Zoids. Yeah, the pun wasn't really worth it, was it? Especially as Zoids are very cool toys and their game is surprisingly good. They deserved a cartoon, I think, in the 1980s, but they never got one, meaning it missed out on being part of my ZX Spectrum games based on TV shows list, which I'm sure it must be heartbroken about if it was indeed a sentient thing with feelings rather than a cassette tape with data on it. At least it gets a spot on the weird licensing list. It's probably only weird because it didn't have a cartoon despite it having a range of cool toys, which just seems a bit bizarre to me. So yes, we're going to be looking at the Commodore 64, the Amstrad and the Spectrum versions of Zoids: The Battle Begins. Aren't we all lucky? Before we get to this clearly very confusing looking 8-bit computer title though, shall we have a look at its license? Zoids, or Techno-Zoido as it's known in Japan, are a range of toys released by Tomy dating as far back as 1982. Much like Transformers, it started out as a collection of other toy lines like Mechabonia and Starzita, and they were all gathered under one larger umbrella called Zoids in Europe and the US. As you can see, they're a collection of robot animals that fight each other. They're covered with guns and things, and they're all either wind up or they've got batteries in them to make them walk about and fight. They're pretty damn cool, I'm sure you'll agree. Zoids became the name of the brand in Japan also, and it's remained that way ever since because yes, Zoids in some form or another have carried on since then. If you're an old scrote like me, you're probably a bit surprised to find it's still going very strong indeed and has had several animes based upon its license from like the 2000s onwards. The only lore we got back in the day was in the UK produced Spider-Man and Zoids comic, which didn't feature Spider-Man versus Zoids. The Spider-Man part of it was reprints of the US comic, whereas the Zoids was a wholly UK creation, and quite dark with it. But that is just one of the storylines that are featured in the Zoids universe. You see, the storyline has a range of different continuities depending on which era of media it's in, but most of it can be boiled down to big blue robot animals fighting big red robot animals for control of the war-torn planet Z. But really, all we need to know is that the toys look really cool and will make you wish that gorillas in real life would just get a pair of Bret Hart sunglasses so they could look like their mechanical counterparts. Come on, start living up to your true potential, Chunky. The Zoids have featured in a Zoidzilla ton of games over the years, mainly on the Nintendo consoles, taking in the delights of the NES, the Game Boy, the GameCube, the Game Boy Advance, the Nintendo DS, the Wii and the Switch, in various RPG, fighting and turn-based strategy games. The franchise has also had titles on the MSX and the Xbox 360, but the game we're interested in today is the earliest and, dare I say, most curious and distinct of them all, appearing on the Amstrad, the Commodore 64 and the Spectrum. It appeared on the MSX too, but I couldn't find an emulator to run it, so we're just stuck with the Big 3 UK 8-bit micros. Sorry MSX chaps, not that many of you exist. Martek, who we've previously covered thanks to us running abruptly into Samantha Fox's front meat before walking away awkwardly in a previous video, are the publishing house here. They handed coding to the Electronic Pencil Company, a team who didn't really have a lot of strings to its bow or a lot of pedigree. They produced things like Global Commander, The Fourth Protocol, Zoids: The Battle Begins, and they also had a hand in converting Sensible Soccer's first attempt at a soccer game to the US Commodore 64 with Keith Van Aaron's Pro Soccer. Who in the bejesus is Keith Van Aaron? Why is he in Micro Pro Soccer, and why am I writing his name down for a future video? Anywho, the storyline to this game is there's a planet where there's been a war, then they decided to have a bit more war, then they had a bit more war than that, and then they noticed there was a bit of ground over there that hadn't had a bit of war on it, so they went over there, made a nuisance of themselves, and had a bit more war on that too. The imperialist red Zoids, too busy with the war to get a decent name, so they went with the colour of their android shells, have brought the Zoid star sector to its knees, and it's up to the similarly nomenclaturally deficient blue Zoids to protect what remains of their war-torn husk of a planet. They're onto a bit of a loser, but suddenly they're aided by a crashed astronaut from Earth who just so happens to have the unique ability of both Zoid thought, the ability to pilot Zoids with his mind, and incredible plot contrivance. Guess who you are in this game? You are the Earthman. The aim of the game is to reassemble the Mac Daddy of Blue Zoids, Zoidzilla, and put a stop to the fearsome Redhorn the Terrible and his fellow red Zoid swine. You do this by controlling a Spider Zoid and using its frame to mastermind a turnaround in the war fortunes for the Blue Zoids. If you're looking at this screen and you're wondering what the hell is going on, you're very much getting a feel for what it's like to play Zoids The Battle Begins for the first time. What the devil is going on here, and what does this have to do with battery-operated toys that used to walk about slowly? Well, the windows are representations of your Zoid's current status, and the icons enable you to do a variety of war hero actions. There are 8 sections of Zoidzilla to find, with a piece of him now stored by the Red Zoid army in each of their bases. You must infiltrate each enemy city, planning your attack carefully. The Zoidzilla part will be stored in one of the many buildings, and you could just try and find that and get out, but that won't work at all. You'll just get obliterated. You see, each base has several defensive buildings you might want to take care of first. There are mines, radio transmitters and power generators that provide energy for the force fields of the city, and damaging one or more of these assets will make your task a lot easier. You will also find Zoids wandering around between the cities, no doubt a little bit lost. You'll be rewarded with each city takeover with a replenished armory and health, and you may even get upgraded to a more powerful Zoid. This won't be easy, as the game is an absolute beast in terms of its difficulty, and just getting your head around its mechanics will take your average retro gamer a couple of hours at least, even to take down that first city. There's a level of complexity here that we weren't used to getting at the time, and while it may look like a pair of beshitten trousers left by an unfortunate in the local woods, it is an incredibly engaging title once you get to grips with it. Each of those icons has a purpose, be it blocking radio signals from Zoids, sensors that pick up missile attacks, and it tracks how your Zoid feels about having chunks blown out of its flank. I'll bet it's not happy, and it will let you know about it. There are even cool encounters where a little window's up and you have a little shoot 'em up section as you launch missiles, fend off enemy projectiles, and have set twos with rival Zoids. Take that, mister! I must say I was pleasantly surprised and incredibly impressed with Zoids The Battle Begins. It is clever stuff. I'll give you that as a license of a kid's toy, it's probably not a great idea. It's like sitting your kid down in front of Das Boot instead of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and expecting him to enjoy himself. It might be just a little bit beyond his current ability, and potentially is not going to evoke the correct excitable response from them about these big robot toys walking into each other and roaring. But kids are dumb, and this is good stuff indeed. There's a depth here that just isn't seen in a lot of other 8-bit titles, and clearly it is very different from most of your licensed toy titles. There clearly is a lot of love put into it, a slavish devotion to get the atmosphere of a war-torn robot planet absolutely down. It is crammed with detail and absolutely should be given a couple of hours of your time at the very least. But do give it time, as the first few times you'll be very Zoid. See, I've bookended it with terrible puns. In their issue 30, Commodore User were very effusive in their praise of Zoids, finishing off their review with, "Do you get the idea I like this game? You bet I do." They then gave it a 5 out of 5. Crash were equally lofty in the praise of the ZX Spectrum version in February 1986. They declared it as a brilliant arcade action strategy game. They scored it a whopping 96%. Amtix complete the praise hat-trick in their issue 8, awarding it a 93%, hailing it as a masterpiece that should be in every Amster's collection. Amster? Is that what Amstrad owners were called? Man, you guys deserved Bridget and Dempsey and Makepeace. Jesus Christ, Amster. So yes, a surprising game, Zoids, in many respects, and indeed the best game based on the world's second favourite battery-operated vibrating toy. There, my friends, is the dildo joke. What's next on our Weird Games trail? Well, I think we've had enough quality after this week's effort, so we need to better ourselves in other areas. So let's predict our future and give up smoking with this pair of DS oddities. Oh dear. Like, subscribe, and K thanks bye.